Hi, my name is Madison Thompson. This is my Phylum project archive for Ascomycota. It's a fungal plant, and this is for Biology 102, Section 4. So this division has some specific common characteristics that all the fungi inside of it have to encompass. So all of these fungi have to be non-mobile and they have to go through sporic reproduction. There's actually 3 subdivisions of the Ascomycota, and some of them, they just contain specific organisms like yeast, multi-stage fungi, soil-based fungi, yeast that bud. But the one we're going to focus on is Mycotina. And the organism specifically that we're focused on is Xanthoria parietina, and it's part of this Mycotina subdivision of Ascomycota. And these organisms include animal and plant pathogens, mycorrhizas, endophytes, and lichens, and those fungi and aquatic habitats. The organism that we're looking at is a lichen, and Xanthoria parietina is an interesting lichen. Its common name is orange lichen or sunburst lichen. And in the next slide, we'll explore how it gets the name sunburst lichen on occasion. But a little bit about the name, it comes from the Greek word xanthos, which means yellow. However, it can also appear orange. It depends on the amount of moisture and sunlight available to the organism. And it also comes from the word patina, which means walls, because this organism has to grow on a surface. It must grow on a building, wall, rock, or another flat surface that it can kind of climb. So here's some images. This is me on spring break in Utah, and the image on the right is a little bit more detailed, so you can kind of see the sunburst pattern that I was talking about earlier, where what actually happens is the lichen reproduces during times of plentiful moisture and when it has ideal nutrients, and when it reproduces, it's able to spread. However, when the organisms on the inside die, the parent organisms die, they are then stuck in a situation where the ones on the outside are still surviving. So you see these sunburst or open circles. And some more identifying characteristics of this organism: it is on a flat surface, so we know that it's on the rock, so it's probably lichen. You can see these little grooves that are kind of occurring right here, the valleys within it, and that's where algae grows. Lichen is a combination of algae and fungus, and these little grooves must be present for the algae to flourish. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more depth in the future. But for now, just looking at this graph, I can tell by the orange color, the location, the environment, and the shape of the organism's growth pattern that it is in fact sunburst lichen. And as a result, we took a picture and it's in this project now. So lichen has an interesting mode of nutrition. As I said earlier, lichen is composed of both algae and fungi. And as a result, it's photoautotrophic and chemoheterotrophic. So it's composed of 5 to 10% algae and 90 to 95% fungi, and it's called bitrophic. So this means that the organism gets its energy through multiple forms. The algal component of lichen gains energy through photosynthesis, meaning it produces and converts its own energy into usable forms by taking in the nutrients around it. So what this means for the lichen is that it has a constant source of energy when resources are available. Unfortunately, in a lot of environments, these resources aren't readily available. This means that while the photosynthetic capability is there, and the algae are protected in those little grooves that I mentioned earlier, where they can grow and proliferate in a more moist environment because water and nutrients can collect in the grooves formed by the fungus, they are still not able to photosynthesize at a very rapid rate. So this means that there has to be another source of energy for the other 90 to 95% of the plant to also help keep that algae alive until it can do its job. So this is where the fungal component comes in, and the fungal component is parasitic, meaning it takes energy from dead or living organisms. This is done through decomposition and explains why the algae prefers to be on a flat surface. It has to come into contact with other biotic factors, where there can be water runoff that helps to feed the algae, or there can be other organisms that are, say, flying and landing on it, or it's just on the soil. It has to be in contact with something that can decompose. And this is a very important and actually makes lichen a keystone species, something that we will again talk about later. So as for the mode of reproduction, lichen are a combination of algae and fungi, and they work symbiotically as well a plant. And this symbiotic relationship results in 2 things that are very totally different. The best example I can give for this is sodium chloride. And you have sodium and you have chlorine, and they're very dangerous apart. But when you put them together, you have table salt, which is something that's essential to our survival. So the fungi reproduces via sporic meiosis, and this process includes both haploid and gamete cells. And I'm going to explain this with these highlighters here. So you start out as a diploid, and you have fungi, lichen, whatever. It's chilling. And then you move on and it reproduces. It goes through mitosis several times, and eventually it goes through meiosis. So it goes to this asexual reproduction where these diploid cells are then split into haploids. So you have the caps and the markers. And then over time, these are spread. So these are spread through spores that say they travel, and this pink cap ends up on this blue marker here. And then the blue cap travels and lands on another source of lichen and ends up on the pink marker. So even though they're reproducing asexually, there is genetic diversity. And this is a great example of how a community can work together to create genetic diversity when there otherwise wouldn't be any. So as for source, range, and distribution, Xanthoria parietina was found at Dead Horse State Park in Utah. And as you can see, there's a little clump right there where it was found. And it has a dispersive distribution, as can be seen here in this image. And you can kind of tell that it's dispersive because it's not just here, there, and everywhere little clump. It's specified areas, but then a little bit over here, a little bit over there, a little bit over here, a little bit over there. So by this image, we can tell that it's clumped and dispersive because it's spread out across the world, but there are some places like the Midwest, Southern Australia, and Northern Europe where there's a whole lot of it, despite there being very little in other parts of the world, if any. So it is an international species and it does favor tropical or desert areas. Now, lichen are best fit to survive in wet environments. This is because the algal component can thrive there. However, they can still survive in desert environments by functioning through the fungal component. So their algal component becomes active and they begin to grow when water is readily available. Moisture is a very, very important factor for this organism to survive. And it's so like I said, the way it works, imagine the Grand Canyon being filled with a river. Well, if the river's dry, then how does the organism survive? It has to rely on the fungal component. But when there's even a little bit of water in the river, the algal component can photosynthesize, and then the organism can spread, as you can see on the rocks here, and become much larger. And the sunburst pattern will still occur, but it'll be more slow because there won't be as much of a deficit in the center of the community. And lichen must be on top of something to survive so they can access that water runoff and those nutrients that are within the water. And lichen is also endemic to the places that we saw on the map previously, specifically the Midwest and Northern Europe. The primary ecological role of this organism is to be a keystone species. They not only function to clean the air in their environment by releasing those digestive enzymes we talked about and are going to talk about, but they're also considered to provide a nesting material for birds and serve as a food source for birds, rodents, and deer. And they protect trees and rocks from weathering and erosion by acting as a surface coating. If you ever go out west, you'll hear them say, stay on the trail, and you'll notice that the trail is a very light color, but the soil around it is very dark and more crunchy. And that's actually lichen on the surface preventing erosion because it's holding the soil in these little balls instead of letting it kind of just be free. And here are my references. Thank you for watching. I hope that this was enjoyable and helped